HTML is a programming language. It stands for HyperText Markup Language. It's a standard markup language for documents designed to be displayed in a web page. It usually assists with the cascading style sheet, which is usually called CSS, right? Yeah, for presentation to make those components, those structure part of the web page look beautiful. And at times we use to also combine the scripting language called JavaScript to add more interactivity and make page be dynamic at the front end level. So by the end of this tutorial, you will be able to build this nice looking template with almost all the fundamental of HTML and CSS needed, right? So it will be very nice. Make sure you follow the tutorial till the end. We will even add some new pages like you can see here, right? It's look good. That's the about us page, and then we will also having the contact us page. Great, right? And our service page too will be here. I just wanted to make it multiple pages so that you actually see how it works, right? Great. So let's start. Here we'll see basically what an HTML element is. So it's mostly just based on HTML tag and attribute, right? When you want to write an HTML element, you actually need what we call an HTML tag, like you can see here, like A for example for links, and P for paragraph, and so on, as we are going to see here. For example, we have an HTML element which is a link and having an attribute of HR, which is equal to this link google.com, and then this is the content of the element, and here we have the closing tag. So as a rule in HTML, any opening tag must be closed, even though there are some exceptions that we use to call them self-closing tag, but for that part don't bother, we'll talk about it later in this course. And that is how a basic structure of an HTML document look like. So we should have our document starting with this HTML tag, and it should be closed even though it's not closed here. And we directly, as the first child of this HTML document, we have another tag called head, where we usually insert some metadata and some script like JavaScript external scripting file. We usually insert to some links for styling, and commonly we use this title there also as a child of this head section. And for the metadata, we'll talk about it, don't bother. You get more to know about this when we start writing some basic code, right? This second child, which is very sibling to the head, is called body, and that's where we put all the HTML element or all the tag and text that we will be displaying in front of the user at the browser level, right? Great. Now part 2, we will be talking here of great. This part will be more focusing on detail about HTML element. We will start with heading. In fact, we will talk of heading, we will talk of paragraph, div and span, link or anchor. We will talk of order and unordered list. We will talk of tables, forms, images, session, aside, articles, header and footer. So don't bother about the order. We will be following the order that will allow us to build the template that we mentioned previously. So at the end of the day, you understand how all this HTML element works, and that's the most important thing. Great. Okay, let's start. Heading are usually used to declare content or HTML structure that are part of that we can call title, right? So it basically have a number. We have H1, H2 up to H6, right? And all of this is just to represent title, and the difference of one to keep decreasing in terms of font size, how the text is big, and then the H1 is more bigger than the H2, then H3, and so on and so on. As we are as the number is increasing to 6, the font size is also decreasing. So let's see practically what we are talking about. We launch our VS Code. Let's expand it. We open our project. Now we start our new file. We are going to create our first file into this project called HTML CSS 101. So we go there, we click here, and we put the name of the file, index.html. Here we will be written HTML code. Let's create our HTML document, right? We put HTML and we open, we close it. As we said, we have the head section, right? Here we will have a title and welcome. Page title, and we'll keep things simple. Then we'll keep things simple. Let's create our body. Here, this is the body, and this section is where we are going to put all the content we'll be using, that will be showing to the user browser. Yeah, here we can create an H1. Yeah, here we can put a P tag, and we just say paragraph. Now this is basically the structure of an HTML document, right? But this is not enough, because this is not yet known as an HTML5 document. But since we are written only HTML5 here, you must put this doc type, like you can see here. This is always the first line of an HTML5 document. When the browser, while rendering the content, see that, it know that you are written HTML5. That's it. Don't forget to put that at the before. Now you can see we have our head, and here we'll be inserting all the metadata and external scripting and links, right? Here is the body section, and we'll be inserting all the content that form the structure of our web page. Now this is not enough, and it takes so much time to write. So in fact, it's not the best practice to do it while we are using VS Code. The best and easier way to use VS Code and make this more, so we can collapse this explorer, or this left side navbar, by just clicking here. And then since we zoom in, let's now use what is good about VS Code is that it has so many features. With this one that we will be using too much, it's called auto completion. It's one of its plugin that allow us to do that. We'll just put HTML, and then we put column 5 like this, and we hit enter. Great, you see it has generated all this metadata, like this cassette UTF-8 name viewport, for making sure the content will be rendered responsive, to make sure the responsiveness will be taken into account when the page will be rendered at the browser level, right? This is also for the compatibility of Internet Explorer. And then we can put this title of the tab, right? That's the title will be showing at the tab level. And now we can put our paragraph by just entering P and hit enter. It create the tab for us, and that's great, right? We can put here paragraph now. And then to launch this, we just have to go and do right click and open with live server, or you type the shortcut, and we see this our page that's launched, and that's the title of the tab as I told you, right? This is the content that will be showing at the body level. Everything at the body level will be showing here. Great, let's continue now. Okay, let's start with the order and unordered list. Here, order and unordered list, or list in HTML of the content, right? And we go into our browser, we will see the header section just looking like this. Now let's use it as a HTML element that we use to represent data in form of list. Like for example, the list of all the students of the class. For example, the list of all the material you need to know HTML and so on, right? So basically we use UL for unordered list and OL for ordered list, but we can use some CSS to make it more beautiful, like changing the list bullet that we'll see when we start writing some code. So let's go directly into our browser, into our text editor, and type some code about the list there. Let's basically see what is a list, right? We usually just start it with this UL, and then this is the list itself. But now we are going to put this time 5, for example, to make 5 lists inside this unordered list, right? We can say 1, and we say 2, we say 3, and the 5, right? If we go into our browser now, we'll be able to see the rendering. Great. As I told you, the live server actually reload on edit. Whenever we make any modification, the file just got reload. This is the list of number from 1 to 5, right? Now if you want to make this an order list, all we need to do is just by going here and change this UR to OL, right? And get back into our list and see how it look like, right? You see it's ordered now from 1 to 5. That's basically how a list works. Now let's try to use this to represent our header section of the template we want to build. So this is how it should look like. So we need a list of 3 elements, and this one will not necessarily be a list. Let's just make it like this. And you may wondering how it look inside horizontal and without dot. Then don't bother, we'll use some CSS to see how to remove those style and make it look exactly like you are and see in this picture. Great, let's do it. Now what we'll have to do is to change this into an order list. But before that, we need another HTML element that is called header, and the header is just like the container. We use it to represent the header section of an HTML page, just like the head. But this header is different than the head we saw for metadata, because this one is what we put at the body level, and it's actually show in the browser for user to see, right? This part is basically a container that we usually fit the content or the structure of the head section of our HTML page inside, right? Let's try to do it on our content now and see what we are talking about. We cancel this and we just put like this. Now we hit enter. If you put some text there and say header section of the, now let's use it as our container to just contain the header section, the list section URL, right? We need it to be ×3, since we need we need it to be ×2, right? Since we need 3 elements for service, about, and contact. Now we can put services, and here we put our about, and lastly we put our contact, right? How is that looking like? That's it. Great. Okay, we can now, since this one is a container, we usually need to even put this thing inside an A tab to make it easy. Normally we were supposed to do it like this. I actually make a mistake, so we put UL LE, and inside this LE we are having an A element, right? So, and this is the part that we need it to show 3 times. That's why we put in factor and we put ×3, right? That's it. And you can see now that this is where we are putting services, and here we are putting about, here we are putting contact, right? Great. We can cancel this part now, and as I was telling you before, we need this one now to be inside a div now, so that we put our HTML plus CSS, right? I think that's how it was looking like in the, yeah, HTML plus CSS. Now, how is this one looking at the browser level? Okay, now let's see how we can make this part shift completely and become horizontal. Now we need to use some CSS to do that, right? Let's start by adding some class, some attribute called class. They are attributes that we use to identify our HTML element and be able to access the HTML at the CSS level. We can have now you can see that we already have all the structure of the HTML, right? We are having this logo of HTML plus CSS, we are having the services, and we are having the about and contact, as you can see here on the image. But the only thing is that it doesn't look pretty nice like here, right? This time we need to introduce another concept called CSS, for cascading style sheet, right? This is the part I am talking about. Yeah, this is the part 3 that will be covering that CSS. And don't bother if I'm not following this order as I told you before, but I will make sure by the end I will have touched all of these 13 CSS element or property that we will cover, right? So this CSS just stands for cascading style sheet, and it's made for making our HTML structure or our HTML content looking good or presentable. Yeah, it's for beautiness, and it's to make HTML beautiful. So we will be talking of how we can add an CSS, and let's create our first CSS file line of code. Now, CSS alone, it's useless. You must combine it with HTML to have some sense of it, right? We are using it to it's just like a human without dresses. It's representing the structure, which is the HTML, and then dresses alone are CSS, and when you combine the two, you a beautiful person with dresses on him. So if you have only dresses, it will never be useful, right? They just become useful when someone wears them, right? So let's create our first CSS code right now. We will start it directly into our HTML page. It's called style, and here we'll start by just giving some color into this A element. Now we call it color. Don't bother, I will explain what I'm talking about. If I say red, right? How is that going to look like? You can see all the text are red, right? Okay, what's happened? We need this is the basic structure of a CSS code. We need this first part, that is before the curly braces. It's called the selector, the CSS selector, right? This A here is what we call an element selector. It allows you to select an HTML element using the name of the element. Here we have select all the HTML element that is having the name A, right? The name of the tag of that element is A, and then we give some property column value. Now this is a CSS property, color of an element text, right? As you can see this highlighting up there, and then this one is the value. We just say select all the A element of our HTML document and give them the color of red. That's what's happened. Now let's see if you want to remove this underline. You see, by default HTML have the style of underlining all the A element. We are going to remove that by just putting text decoration to be known, right? Now great, I have removed the color and no color anymore, but you can directly see that all the A element are not having any underline anymore. That is the first thing. This is again the CSS property, and this is the value of that CSS property. This is called text decoration, and they say decoration applied to font used for an element text. Now let's say we want all of our this to be, now let's say we want to remove, now let's use some CSS to make this our unordered list display horizontally without the dot notation. The first thing we have to do is to target it by the selector. We are targeting this, the selector is there, and we can say style list style type, then we say none. This list style type, right, remove, when we say none, it actually remove all of the dot that was here, all the bullet that was here. We can even change it to square like this, and then this thing has become square now. If you are not seeing it, this is what I'm talking about, right? Great. Now we don't need those dots before in front. We just want our content to be horizontal, and to make them horizontally we need to change something that we call the display, which is another CSS property which allow you to give the type of display of element display. How do you want an element to be displayed? It usually have many value. You can say display block, it will display as a block element. You can say inline, it will display an inline or inline block. Then we can use this new feature called flex tool that actually make it expand or expand to be horizontal. If you look at it now, you see what I'm talking about, right? Now let's remove the dot first. By putting none here, and this is how it will look like, already giving the shape, right? Now it's not that quite well. What we have to do again is to come here and see that since this two is still having one line and then another one at below it, we want this one to be displayed horizontally. Everything inside this header content to be displayed horizontally too. And to do that, we need to do something like header, which is the selector. We are selecting it, and we say display, we say flex again, right? Great, it's already giving the shape. Let's now add some borders into this element to actually see very well what is happening, right? We are going to have 1 pixel, and we say solid. This is how we give border to an HTML element, right? We remove this and we can give this one a border of, we can give this one a border of 1 pixel to but solid, and we give him red instead of green. Tab here, which is not good. We can remove this by just giving this element, this UL element, a margin top and bottom of auto. Now, what is the margin? It's another CSS property that we use to do something. We can give this how it can take 4 values, so depending on how you are going to give the values. So the first one is the top without any comma, just put space. The second one is the right. The third one is the bottom, and the fourth one is the left, right? You put it like this. Now this top, it's usually a distance, right? That means we are saying from the top of the element, in fact from the top of the nearest element at the top level, give him some space, like for example 10 pixel, right? The pixel is the unit we use to measure distance in CSS. It's the most used, but there are many other today, as for example REM, which is a kind of relative distance measurement, but relative to the font size, which is usually by default 16 pixel, right? Anything start from the pixel base, and a pixel is just a smallest unit of a graphical representation dot point, yeah, if you can tell it point, yeah. So this one you can say from right we put it maybe 10 pixel to from the bottom you give him maybe 10 pixel. You must put the unit, except if you put 0 you don't need any unit, right? Let's see how it look like. You can say the top one, we want the top one to be 0, for example. You see, it removed all the gap that was up. Now we can give the bottom to 0. We can give the bottom to 0, and we now just give this one maybe 10 pixel too, right? This is how it should look like. We have removed all this one. Now to make this thing more nice, we can just simpler, because this is the top, this is the right, this is the bottom, this is the left, right? If you put only 2, like for example this is the top and the bottom, and then this one is the left and the right. The first, if you put only 2 value, the first one is it represent the top and the bottom, and the second one represent the left and the right, right? See how it look like? Still great. And now we can leave it like that, and we have solved that problem of the gap. There's no gap anymore. Now we want this part to shift to the right level. We can just do that. Yeah, we can just do that at that property of float. It's still another CSS property that shifts an element to the right or to the left. So we are going to shift it to the right and just put it. Great. We have our content that's directly aligned at the left level. Now we are seeing that there's a certain gap here. Can you see this gap? This thing is not touching the edges of the body section. Why? Because by default the HTML document comes with the body, and yeah, this because by default the body element of the HTML page has a certain margin of minus 8 pixel or 8 pixels, something like that, right? If we look at it here, we'll see what I'm talking about. By inspecting, you usually see what it looked like. To click here, when you click on body directly, this is the body at the style level. This is what we call the developer tool. by either right clicking and go to inspect, or by going into this session, and yeah, you will open the developer tool. You go into this section, those are HTML elements. You click on the element that you want to target, and then directly you see the star that's affecting it, display block and having a margin of 8. We have to remove that margin. As you can see here, if I put it general style, it is not related to anything. We specify our body and we say margin of 0 and we close it. Great, you see no margin now is 0 and it's actually touching the edges of the computer. Now it's almost done. The remaining thing is to put some gaps here. Right now, to do that, we need to go into our HTML element and trying to put some gap in each of these lists. Right, so by selecting a list, we can put a gap into this element and then put a gap to this one, put a gap to this one too. Right, then we go here, we put our LE to select the element, and we say we give him some margin. Why not soft margin? Right, I just wanted to have some margin, right, of maybe 1 rm. That is it. This is how it's looking like now. You can see, is this one enough? Yeah, I think so. Now to remove this last part, because I don't like this last part, let it be completely touching the edges of the body section too. To remove that, we can just select the last list, right, by using the sudo called last child. You can see here, selecting the last child and say margin right of 0. We are overwriting the margin right that was actually 1 rm, and you can see that it's touching it completely. Then we can put this thing, we can increase this gap a bit by putting it to 1.2. okay, now let's remove the borders we were using just for the guidance purpose. We are okay with that, and we can remove it like this. No border, but it's just still looking at what we are looking for. You see it, this one look like it's a bit center, it's having some gap here and having some gap here. How do we do that? We are going to create what we usually call a container to just create that behavior. Right, if you go here and we put a class called container, and we go at a CSS level and we select that. We tell you it's a class. Whenever you add a class attribute into your HTML element, it allows you to select that particular element using the name of the class. Now, how do you let CSS know that you want to select an element by the class? You put dot in front of the name of the class, and you directly know that you are selecting an element using a certain class that you have specified the name, like here. Right, now we have specified that header using or any element. We have specified any element in the HTML document that's having a class with the name container. Right, when you see dot, it means that any element attribute that's having a class container. Now we can put it to be, we are going to write there in. Right, so we are going to say, okay, cover only 80% of the full screen, and give him some margin of auto 1 rm, and then up. We are going to pass only 2 value. The first one is representing the top and bottom, and this one is representing the left and right. It's going to create an equal space left and right. That's why we put auto. Right, great. This is how it's looking like. I think it's exactly what we were looking for. But this one seems to be a little bold, right? Yeah, it seems to be bold. So let's get and make it more bolder. Okay, we get back here and we have to actually target that element. This is the element, and to easily target it, either we can select it using another css selector called id. We call it logo. For example, I just use this keyword id intentionally to let you know about it, because we could just still use a class and it will work. Now, to select an element as an id, we put hash in front of it and the name of the id, like you can see here, and we are going to introduce another css that's called font weight, right? It allows you to give the weight to the font. You can see we are going to bold, bolder, and so on. I'm going to just put it starts from 100, 200, and increase 100 by 100, and it gives you the width, the thickness of some text, right? If you look at the text now, it may look a little bold, right? Maybe by incrementing it by 100, it will look better. Great. Whatever the case, even though it's not looking exactly what we are looking for, it's already not bad. We can increase the font size a bit to make sure it look more close to what we are trying to do, right? This is the font size up here. Font size just to give the size of the text size. Yeah, is to give the size of the text, right? We are going to use something like this here. It's too big. Let's reduce it a bit. I think 1/4, or why not 1/2? Okay, great. I think it's look good now, and that is pretty what we are looking for. Now we can create just a line after that to make sure it's looking exactly like what we are looking for. Great. This is our header section done. Now, if you look at this code, our css is already very long and it's not good. It's not recommended to put some css directly in the html page like this. Then we are going to remove this. This is what we usually call inline css. Now we are going to remove it and put it from an external file called link, for example, and we will call it, we will put it inside a folder called asset, and we will create a css folder and put it with the name style.css. Now let's create this file. It doesn't exist. Yes, we go into our file explorer and we create a folder called asset, as you can see here, and then inside this folder we create another folder called css, and the asset is the folder that we usually put all the static content of our site, like style, scripts, and images, right? So now we call the name of our file .css. I remember I cut the style. This is the style. I put it into this file. Now this file is actually linked into our HTML through this link tag, and the rel here is telling style sheet, and with this is where we specify the source. We start from the current HTML document and start navigating through a folder or files that we are going to, right? This is correctly linked to this, and we can see nothing have changed. The color, I think the color is exactly as it was, and that's perfect, right? So let's finish with this session and we are continue with the part 2 by, and don't forget to subscribe.